nobleman spit on pregnant mother carrying bread, not knowing she belonged to the alpha vampire. The city of Valen Reach was a place of marble towers, gilded windows, and whispering courtyards where nobles moved like kings of their own tiny empires. From above, it gleamed like a jewel, perfect and untouchable. But down in the streets, the true life of the city struggled to breathe. The cobblestones were slick with mud from last night's rain, the market smells of damp bread and rotting fish blending into a heavy, almost unbearable scent. In the lower quarters, no one smiled. Life was a fight to survive, and even the smallest act of defiance could be crushed by the nobility. Halira moved through the streets quietly, her small form wrapped in a faded brown cloak. Her hand rested lightly on her swollen belly. She carried a loaf of bread, her only purchase of the day, clutched as if it were a treasure. Each step was slow. Her body ached with the weight of her child and the long, bitter walk from the market. She had learned long ago that the world was neither kind nor fair. The marketplace was bustling. Merchants shouted over each other, selling vegetables, pottery, and fabrics dyed in brilliant colors. Children ran between stalls, chasing one another, their laughter ringing in the cold air. Elira moved past them without notice, avoiding their eyes. She was invisible, just another poor woman among the many who carried the weight of hunger and fear. But the world had a way of noticing her anyway. A young nobleman dressed in crimson and gold swaggered through the market. His boots left impressions on the mud as he moved, and his eyes, sharp and cruel, roamed the crowd as if each person existed only for his amusement. He laughed loudly, the sound cutting through the noise of the market. He spotted Elira before she noticed him, and something in him shifted. A hunger for amusement, a cruel delight. Without warning, he collided with her. The bread fell from her hands, landing in the thick mud. The nobleman stumbled back but quickly regained his balance, smirking. "Well, wow," he said, loud enough for everyone near to hear. "What do we have here? A poor woman carrying nothing but mud for the world to eat?" Elira looked at him, her eyes calm, unafraid. Her voice was soft but steady. "Please, sir, it is only bread." The nobleman laughed again, louder this time. He raised his hand and spat at her feet. The hot, wet disdain landed on the mud and bread alike. The crowd gasped, some of them averting their eyes, others too afraid to speak. Elira did not cry. She dropped to her knees, lifted the ruined loaf, and brushed off the mud with trembling hands. She whispered to herself, almost inaudibly, "Forgive me. My child, forgive me." Her heart ached not for the bread, not for herself, but for the life she carried inside her. She knew this child was special. It was not just flesh and blood. It carried hope, magic, and a bond she could feel even now, deep in her bones. The nobleman laughed again and left, shrugging off the murmur of disapproval from the crowd. He did not notice the fire that flickered in her gaze, nor did he feel the invisible thread that tied her to something far older and far darker than any man. Elira stayed kneeling for a long moment, her hands on her belly. The world seemed to hold its breath, the wind blowing softly through the narrow alleyways. She felt it then, a presence, faint but undeniable, a weight in the air, a whisper of power that made her blood tremble and her heart race. Oh. Far beyond the city, in the mountains of the north, an obsidian citadel rose from the cliffs. Its towers pierced the clouds dark and cold, untouched by sun or storm. Inside, a throne room stretched as wide as a forest, its floors black marble and walls lined with ancient runes. Candles burned with flames that were red as blood. On the throne sat Kaelreth, the alpha vampire king. For centuries he had ruled his domain with a steady hand, feared and respected by all who knew of him. His eyes were closed, but the air around him was alive with anticipation. Something had shifted in the mortal world, something that had not happened in generations. When he opened his eyes, the light seemed to vanish, leaving only shadow and the glow of his crimson irises. He smelled the world, and through the veil of human life, he smelled the injustice. The scent of bread trampled into mud, the faint fear and despair of a woman, and beneath it all, the pulse of something eternal, something tied to him by blood and prophecy. He rose, the throne groaning under his weight. His cloak, black as midnight, swept the floor as he moved. His voice was low, almost a growl, yet it carried across the mountains as if the wind itself spoke his words. "Find her!" Back in the streets of Valenreach, Aelira continued her slow walk home. Each step was careful, measured, for she knew the streets held dangers far greater than a cruel nobleman. But the feeling that someone, or something, watched her would not leave. She glanced over her shoulder, seeing nothing but shadows stretching in the alleyways. She passed the bakery where she had bought the bread, now closed for the night. Reflected the dim glow of lanterns, and she felt the weight of eyes upon her once more. Her pulse quickened. This was not fear alone. It was a recognition, a bond stretching across time and blood. Aelira's home was a small, crumbling cottage on the edge of the quarter. She pushed open the wooden door and entered, lighting a single candle. The warmth of the flame did little to chase away the cold that had settled in her bones. She set the loaf on the table and sat, her hands resting on her belly. The child moved, faint but insistent, as if feeling the presence of something unseen. Her thoughts drifted to the past, to a time when her life had been different, when she had been chosen, not by love, but by fate. By a king not of this world, a ruler bound by darkness and light alike. Ceolrith. She remembered his eyes, his voice, the way he had promised protection and safety even as he vanished into the shadows. She had fled, not out of fear, but out of a desire to protect the child. Outside, the wind howled through the streets, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. Somewhere, in the mountains, Ceolrith moved through the night, his presence brushing against the living world like a shadow passing over water. The city did not notice. It could not. But Aelira, in her quiet solitude, felt the tremor in the air, the pull of something ancient and unbroken. She fell into a restless sleep, her dreams haunted by crimson eyes and a voice that whispered through darkness. She saw Ceolrith standing over her, not as a monster, but as a king who had come too late, raised. His hand reached for her, but always something pulled him back, leaving her alone in the cold and the dark. Morning came slowly, gray and heavy. Aelira awoke with a start, the candle burnt low and the bread untouched. Her body ached, and her heart carried the weight of something she could not name. She wrapped the cloak tighter around her and prepared to leave again, to face the market and the world that had never been kind. But, as she stepped outside, she noticed something strange. The streets were quiet, unusually so. The air felt charged, as if waiting for an invisible signal. The nobleman who had spat on her yesterday was nowhere in sight. The vendors and children moved slowly, their faces pale and eyes wide with unspoken fear. Aelira hesitated. Something was coming. Something powerful. Something that had already begun to change the course of her life. And then she felt it, a whisper, like the brush of wings against her skin. A shadow flickered at the edge of her vision, gone before she could focus. Her child kicked hard, as if responding to a presence it had known before birth. Aelira's breath caught in her throat, pair. She understood, with a clarity that was almost terrifying, that she was not alone. She was never alone. From the north, across mountains and forests, across rivers and roads, Caelreth's shadow moved, swift and silent. He had smelled the injustice, the cruelty, and the challenge to what was his by right. And now, nothing, not death, not distance, not mortal fear, would stop him from reclaiming what had been taken. Elira clutched her belly, feeling the child stir violent, and whispered into the cold air, "I will protect you, no matter what comes." The wind answered with a howl, carrying with it a scent of iron and snow, and something darker, older than time itself. And from the north Caelreth spoke again, though she could not hear it. The mountains trembled faintly, the rivers shifted in their courses, and a single word traveled across the land. Find her. Elira shivered, though she did not yet understand why. Her life, quiet and hidden, had been shattered in a moment. She did not yet know the full weight of what awaited her. The darkness, the power, the love that would burn brighter than any crown. But she would soon learn. And when she did, nothing would ever be the same. The night had fallen over Valen Reach like a velvet curtain. Lanterns flickered in the streets, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed alive. A city, always noisy, was now strangely silent. Even the wind seemed to pause, holding its breath. Somewhere, high above the rooftops, a shadow moved with impossible speed. Caelreth, the Alpha Vampire King, had crossed mountains and rivers, forests and empty plains. His cloak trailed behind him like darkness incarnate, and the cold air did not touch him. His senses stretched far beyond human limits. He could smell the bread she carried yesterday, still faint in the alleys, and he could feel the pulse of her child, beating as surely as the moon rose over the kingdom. He had not forgotten. He would never forget. Elira, meanwhile, walked her usual path through the narrow streets, unaware of the predator who watched over her. She was careful, alert, though she did not know why a chill ran down her spine. Her belly swelled with life, a secret miracle she carried alone. Her hands rested lightly on it as she passed shuttered windows and closed doors, aware that in the city shadows could hide cruelty, or worse. Her thoughts drifted again to Caelreth, though she had not seen him in years. Remembered the first time he had appeared, a figure as terrifying as he was magnificent, his eyes burning like red stars.
He had not spoken much then, but his presence had left a mark on her soul.
She had never understood why a being so powerful, so immortal, would choose her, a mortal woman, but she had felt the bond immediately. The blood between them, the magic in her veins, had called to him, just as his shadow had called to her. She had fled when the child had grown inside her, fearing the court, the prophecy, and the dangers that came with being tied to a creature of the night. She had hoped to hide, to live quietly, to protect the child at all costs, but the world had other plans.
Caelreth's shadow lingered near the market, where the nobleman had humiliated her.
He watched the streets with patience and fury alike. The man who spat at her yesterday had been careless. He had revealed too much, spoken too loudly, and now the threads of destiny had pulled Caelreth toward her. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest scent of her hair, of her skin, of the life growing inside her. He stepped from the darkness and vanished, moving closer but careful not to be seen. Even he, immortal and all-seeing, could not touch her without warning. Elira entered the square near the old fountain, clutching her cloak tighter around herself. Her breaths came in shallow bursts, not from fear, but from exhaustion and the weight of the child. She paused to rest on the cold stone of the fountain's edge, her hands rubbing her belly in quiet reassurance. "Please," she whispered to herself, "be safe. Just a little longer." Her words were carried on the wind, and somewhere far away, Caelreth heard them. He knelt on a cliff in the mountains, eyes closed, feeling the pulse of her voice like a fragile thread in the dark. He had been forced to leave her, to vanish into the shadows when human kings demanded the impossible. But he had never stopped watching. Never stopped protecting even from afar. Now, centuries later, the bond flared again, stronger than ever. She had been harmed, humiliated, and though she did not know it, she had called him with the blood of the child she carried. The nobleman who had spat at her was gone from the square, replaced by the normal bustle of the market. But Caelreth's anger did not waver. He felt the rage of a predator, but also the fury of a king who had loved and lost. Every moment she suffered, he suffered. Every threat to her life, to their child, was a wound on him he could not heal. Elora continued walking, unaware of the eyes that followed her every movement. She paused again when she noticed the strange silence around her. The birds had stopped singing. Even the dogs and cats that usually prowled the streets were nowhere to be seen. Something in the air prickled at her skin, a sense of being watched that made her hair rise. She turned abruptly, expecting perhaps another nobleman or a thief. But the streets were empty. Only the shadows moved, stretching in ways that were unnatural. Her pulse quickened, but she did not run. She had learned long ago that fear could be a tool, but it could not protect her child. "Who's there?" she asked softly, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. There was no answer, only silence. And then, a flicker of movement at the edge of her vision. Something dark, impossibly fast, vanished before she could focus on it. Her child stirred sharply, kicking hard, as if sensing the presence. Elira gasped, clutching her belly. She had never felt anything like this before. Not a person, not a thief, not a nobleman. Something far older, far stronger was near. Caelreth watched from the shadows. Closer now, unseen. Did not speak, did not reveal himself. He could wait.
He always waited, but his eyes never left her.
Every breath she took, every step she made, he felt. Every pain, every small triumph resonated within him. She continued home, unaware that destiny itself had begun to bend toward her. By the time she reached the small cottage at the edge of the quarter, night had deepened into a heavy darkness. She lit a candle, the flame flickering in the drafty room. The walls were thin, the roof leaking. But it was safe, for now. Elora knelt by the small wooden table, resting her hands on her belly. The child moved again, softly this time, as if comforting her. She whispered, "We are not alone. I feel it. He glances around in desk. I feel someone watching. I promise." Somewhere beyond the city, Caelreth rose from the shadows, desperate. He had waited centuries for this moment, and now, at last, he was close enough to smell the life he had chosen to protect so long ago. The air trembled around him as he stepped forward, moving silently, a predator and protector in one. But the world was not yet ready. Human kings, unaware of the power that lingered beyond their reach, would not welcome the alpha vampire. Nobles would see her as nothing, a woman of no name, and some would seek to claim her child for their own gain. Caelreth knew this, and he would act carefully. Every step he took must protect her, shield her from those who would harm her, while slowly preparing her for what was to come. Elira, unaware of the watcher in the shadows, fell into a restless sleep that night. Her dreams were filled with crimson eyes, shadows stretching over marble halls, and a voice that whispered in the dark. "You are mine," it said, though not cruelly. "And I will not leave you." She awoke before dawn, her belly pressed against her hands, feeling the life inside her stirring with urgency. The child was not just a child, it was a bridge between worlds, between life and immortality. She did not understand fully what this meant, but she knew instinctively that danger approached. When she stepped outside to gather water, she noticed footprints in the mud that were too large and too deliberate to belong to anyone she knew. They led from the edge of the alley, stopping short of her path. She knelt to examine them, heart pounding. The prints were strange, elongated, as if the owner moved differently than a human. A shiver ran through her, not entirely of fear. She felt something else, something like recognition, a bond she could not name, a thread connecting her to something larger than the city, larger than herself. Far to the north, Caelreth watched the city. He had stayed in the shadows, careful not to reveal himself too soon. He had waited for the right moment, for the child to awaken the bond, for her to feel his presence. And now, finally, the moment had come. But approach her slowly, carefully, allowing her to see glimpses of him without terror. He would not rush. He could wait centuries if necessary. But the bond between them had been reawakened, and nothing, not time, not distance, not mortal fear, could sever it again. Elira returned inside, her hands still pressed to her belly. She felt a sudden warmth, as if someone unseen had brushed against her, reassuring her. "Breaths," she whispered softly. "I know you are near. I feel you."
The candle flickered violently, then steadied.
Outside, the wind carried a faint echo of a voice, almost like a sigh, almost like a whisper. It was not human, not entirely. Promised protection, power, and an unbroken bond. Her heart skipped. Her child stirred again, kicking with urgency, and Elira realized that nothing in her life would ever be the same. Something had begun that could not be stopped. A destiny older than kingdoms, older than empires, stretching across centuries to find her. And Caelreth, watching from the night, smiled. At last, he had found her. Elira's heart pounded as she stood frozen in her small cottage. The figure before her was taller than any human, his presence overwhelming yet strangely familiar. Dim, crimson eyes glowed in the dim morning light, and black hair, longer than she remembered, framed a face that was both terrifying and impossibly beautiful.
You...
"Who are you?" she whispered, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. "I am Caelreth," the figure said, his voice deep and smooth, carrying authority yet tinged with something gentler, something she had once known. "I have come for you, for your safety."
For the child you carry. Elira's knees weakened.
His voice was like a memory, echoing across years she had tried to forget. She had fled from him when the world demanded sacrifices she could not understand. And yet here he was, alive, real, and watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You are real," she said, her voice trembling. I thought you were a story, a myth." Caelreth stepped closer, but not too close. He understood fear, and he would not terrify her. Not yet. "I am real," he said softly, almost a whisper. "And you are mine. No harm will come to you while I am near. But the world will try. The kings, the nobles, even those who do not know your name will seek to claim what belongs to you."
Elira Elira looked down, unsure if she was trembling from fear, awe, or something deeper.
Her past rushed back, the memory of a throne room carved in obsidian, the promise he had made to protect her and the child she now carried. She remembered the warmth in his presence, the quiet strength, the impossible weight of centuries resting behind those red eyes. "Why now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Why after all these years? Caelrith's eyes softened, just a fraction. Because they have dared to harm you. Because they have dared to humiliate the woman who carries my heir. And I will not forgive such arrogance. Elira's thoughts drifted to the market, to the nobleman who had spat on her. Anger flared, but it was mixed with confusion. This man, this immortal, powerful man, was speaking to her as if nothing had changed, as if the years and distance had not separated them. Yet everything had changed. She was no longer the frightened woman he had left behind. She was carrying a life that could alter kingdoms. "I don't understand," she whispered, tears threatening to fall. Why me? Caelrith's gaze held hers, unyielding yet tender. "Because you were chosen! Because you are strong enough to bear what must come! Because the child you carry is not just a child. It is a bridge between worlds, and I cannot let you face this alone." Elira swallowed hard, feeling the truth of his words resonate in her bones. She had known, in some quiet corner of her heart, that her life had always been tied to something greater, but to hear it from him, to feel it, was almost too much to bear. The silence between them was thick, charged with a tension that neither could name. And yet, amid the fear and awe, there was something else, a faint memory of warmth, of trust, of love that had never truly faded. I need time," she said finally. I have to think. I don't know if I can." Caelrith nodded slowly, understanding more than she could imagine. I will wait," he said, "but do not mistake patience for weakness. Time is a luxury we may not have for long." The world stirs. Danger approaches faster than you know. Elira's eyes widened. Danger? Yes, Caelrith replied. The nobleman who humiliated you is not the only one who would exploit your child. Kings and queens, mortal and immortal alike, will see your child as a key to power. We must be cautious. And we must be strong. The words settled over her like a heavy cloak. She looked down at her belly, feeling the child stir. Something ancient and powerful pulsed within, something she had only begun to understand. Her life was no longer her own, and yet, for the first time, she did not feel entirely afraid. Caelrith stepped back, allowing her space, yet his presence filled the room. I will not leave you, he said again. You and the child are under my protection. No one will harm you, not while I stand. Elira nodded slowly. She did not fully understand the extent of his power, nor the prophecy he spoke of, but she felt it. The thread that had bound them years ago was alive once more, taut and unbroken. Over the next few days, Caelrith remained in the shadows, careful not to alarm her. He watched over her as she moved through the city, her every step measured, her every action careful. And yet, she felt the pull of his presence constantly, a warmth in the cold that reminded her she was not alone. Meanwhile, the nobleman who had spat on her was summoned to the palace. Caelrith had made his intentions clear. The man would either learn humility and respect, or face consequences beyond mortal comprehension. The nobles, unused to defiance from someone they considered beneath them, whispered among themselves, fearful and confused. Elira, Unaware of these machinations, continued her life cautiously. She visited the marketplace, collected water, and prepared meals, all while feeling the invisible hand of Caelrith's protection. At night she dreamed of him. The throne room of black marble, the soft brush of his hand on hers, the steady promise in his eyes. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city's towers, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, Caelrith finally stepped into her world fully. He appeared in her cottage doorway, the candlelight casting long shadows behind him. "Elira," he said softly, "we cannot wait any longer. You must come with me." The world will not remain patient, and neither can I. She froze, staring at him, her mind racing. Go now, she whispered, afraid of the power he wielded, afraid of what leaving might mean. I cannot. I am not ready. Caelrith's eyes softened, and he took a slow step closer. You are ready, he said. You have always been ready. And I have waited far too long to let fear keep you from what is yours. You and the child will face this world together. Not alone, not in silence. Elira's hands trembled as she touched her belly. She felt the child respond, a tiny kick that made her gasp. It was as if the child understood the presence of the king who had loved her, who had been bound to her by destiny, by magic, and by blood. "Aye!" she began, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I can." Caelrith reached out, his hand hovering near hers, but not touching. "You can," he said, "because you are not alone. I am with you. I will not leave you." The words settled over her, warming her like the sun breaking through clouds after a storm. She looked up, meeting his gaze, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe. They were not just protector and protected. They were two halves of a destiny long in the making, bound together by love, by blood, by the inevitability of fate. But the world outside did not wait for belief. The nobleman had not been punished yet, but he had learned enough to fear the shadow that had been following Elira. Word had reached others, humans and immortals alike, that something was stirring, something ancient and powerful. The whispers of a child born of mortal and vampire blood had begun to circulate, and with them came envy, fear, and greed. Caelrith and Elira knew they could not remain hidden for long. Every day, every hour, increased the risk that the child would be discovered, that enemies would act, that the delicate balance of their world would be broken. One night, as Elira rested, Caelrith entered quietly, his presence filling the room with warmth and shadow at once. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "They are coming," he whispered, his voice tense. "The humans who would harm you, the ones who would claim your child. They move faster than I anticipated. We must leave." Elira felt fear prick at her chest, but also something stronger, determination. She would not let the child face danger alone. She would not let the man who had spat on her or anyone else claim what was hers. Together, they stepped into the night. Caelrith moved like a shadow, silent and swift, guiding her through the streets she had walked countless times, now strange and threatening under the weight of destiny. Every corner, every alley seemed alive with danger. Yet she felt no fear, not with him by her side. They reached the edge of the city, where the world opened into forests and hills. The wind carried a sense of freedom, and yet the tension in the air reminded them both that danger followed. Caelrith's eyes scanned the horizon, alert to every movement, every sound. Elira clutched her belly, feeling the child stir again. The bond between them was strong, unbroken, and growing with every heartbeat. She knew somehow that the child sensed the world differently than she did, that it felt the power of the Vampire King as clearly as she felt her own heartbeat. They paused on a hill overlooking Valenreach, the city small and fragile below. Caelrith placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her, grounding her. "You see it now," he said softly. "Do you understand why we cannot stay?" She nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered. "I understand, but—" "I am afraid." "Then be afraid," Caelrith said gently, "and let that fear make you strong." "We will face this together. Always." A wind swept across the hill, and for a moment, the world seemed still. The city slept unaware of the storm that was coming, the power that was rising, the bond that was awakening. And then, from the shadows, a figure moved. A human. A messenger. Someone who had come too close. The nobleman, or another like him, carrying news that could change everything. Caelrith's eyes flared crimson. Elira instinctively took a step back, her hands on her belly. "We are not safe," he said, his voice low, sharp, and commanding. "Not yet. But soon we will take our place in the world, and nothing will stop us." The forest was alive with whispers. Shadows stretched between the trees, moving as if the night itself breathed around them. Elira clutched her cloak tightly around her, her hands trembling, not from cold, but from the weight of everything that had come before. Caelrith walked beside her, silent and towering, his crimson eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. The wind carried the scent of danger. Iron and smoke mingled with the faint, sweet scent of her child. "You feel it, don't you?" Caelrith asked softly. "The world shifts. Every heartbeat, every life. It changes because of you, because of what you carry."
Elira pressed a hand to her belly.
The child stirred, kicking sharply, as if sensing the power in the Vampire King beside her. I feel it," she whispered, "but it's frightening. I don't know if I'm ready." Caelrith's expression softened, the predator in him tempered by the love he had carried for centuries. "You are ready," he said, "and I will not leave your side. You are stronger than you know, and together we will face whatever comes." They moved through the forest like shadows themselves, silent and careful. Every step carried the weight of destiny, every breath a reminder that the world was no longer just theirs to inhabit, it was theirs to protect. Suddenly a rustle of leaves echoed through the clearing ahead. Caelrith froze, his gaze narrowing. From the darkness, figures emerged, humans, cloaked and armed, carrying banners and sigils that sent a shiver through the air. These were no ordinary men. They were agents of the king who sought to claim the child, unaware that the alpha vampire had returned to protect what was his. Elira stepped back instinctively, fear tightening around her chest. Caelrith raised a hand, and the shadows seemed to bend, swirling around them like protective waves. "Dude!" "They cannot touch you while I am here." The humans advanced, but as they did, Caelrith's presence seemed to twist the air. The wind howled, carrying a chill that cut to the bone, and the forest itself seemed to rise in silent warning. Trees bent slightly, roots shifted underfoot, and the animals scattered in terror. The leader of the humans raised a hand, signaling his men to stop. His eyes widened as he took in the figure before him. Tall, imposing, radiant in shadow and strength. Crimson eyes met his, and a wave of fear so intense washed over him that he almost fell to his knees. Caelrith's voice rang out deep and commanding. "Leave. Now. You have no claim here. This child is under my protection, and I will not hesitate to defend it." The men hesitated, their courage faltering. They had been sent to take the child, to deliver it to the king who desired it, but they were unprepared for the power before them. Ceolwreth stepped closer, and with every move the air itself seemed to bend to his will. Shadows stretched and danced like living tendrils warning the humans of the consequences of defiance. Aliara watched, awe and fear mingling in her chest. She had always known he was powerful, but seeing him now, protecting her, protecting the child, made her realize just how immense that power truly was. She felt her fear begin to fade, replaced by a strange sense of strength. With him, she was not alone. With him, she could face the world. The humans finally turned, retreating into the forest. Ceolwreth did not follow them. He knew they would return with more, and he was prepared, for now their threat had been neutralized. Pat, he turned to Elira, his eyes softening. It is done, for now, but the world will continue to test us, and we must be ready.
Elira nodded, her hands trembling as she pressed them against her belly. I think I understand now, she said softly. I am not just protecting myself.
Breaths. I am protecting something greater, something powerful. Ceolwreth reached for her hand, taking it gently in his own. Yes, he said, and together we will ensure it survives. Nothing will take this from us. They continued through the forest until they reached a hidden valley, untouched by humans, protected by mountains and ancient magic. Here, Ceolwreth had prepared a sanctuary for them, a place where they could rest and gather strength. The air was warmer, filled with the scent of flowers and earth, a rare calm in a world of danger. Elira settled on a soft bed of moss, her hands never leaving her belly. She felt the child move again, stronger this time, almost as if it recognized the safety of the place. Deze. Ceolwreth knelt beside her, his hand brushing her hair back gently, his presence a shield and a comfort. You are doing well, he whispered. The child feels your strength. You are ready for what comes. Tears slipped down Elira's cheeks, not of fear this time, but of relief and gratitude.
I could not have done this alone, she said. I am grateful you came for me.
I am grateful for you. Ceolwreth's gaze softened, the immortal weight of centuries reflected in his eyes. And I am grateful for you, he said. You have carried the burden alone for so long, but no longer. I will not leave you again. This child, this life, it is ours to protect, together. Days passed in the hidden valley. Elira grew stronger, her body adjusting, her mind accepting the reality of her destiny. Ceolwreth remained ever present, teaching her to sense the danger around them, to feel the power of the child, to trust in her own strength. The bond between them deepened, quiet and steady, growing into something unspoken yet undeniable. Then, one night as the blood-red moon rose high over the mountains, a messenger arrived, a shadowy figure carrying urgent news.
Ceolwreth received the message silently, his crimson eyes flashing with anger and resolve.
They know, he said simply. The king who seeks the child has discovered our sanctuary. He will come, and he will not come alone. Elira's hands trembled. What do we do? She asked, her voice barely audible. Ceolwreth rose, tall and commanding, his cloak flowing like midnight. We face them, he said.
And we will not fail. I will protect you and this child, even if it means burning the world to its foundations.
Aelira nodded, understanding fully for the first time the depth of his promise. She felt a surge of courage, knowing that together they could face any challenge. The next morning, the attackers arrived, a small army sent by the human king, armed and confident. But Caelreth met them at the edge of the valley, his presence alone enough to silence their bravest men.
Shadows rose around him like living walls, twisting and bending, warning them to stay back.
Aelira stayed behind, safe but alert, feeling the power radiate from him, feeling it reach the child she carried. She whispered softly, "We are safe. We are strong." The battle, if it could be called that, was brief. The humans fled before Caelreth even raised a hand, their courage shattered by the sheer presence of the alpha vampire. The king's ambition had met an unyielding force, and he would think twice before testing it again. As the valley fell silent once more, Caelreth returned to Aelira, kneeling beside her. "It is over," he said softly, "but soon. The world will demand more. And we must be ready." Aelira pressed a hand to his cheek, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. I am ready," she whispered, "because you are with me." "Because we are together!" Caelreth leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. "Together!" he agreed, "always." Days later, under the calm light of dawn, the child was born. Safe, healthy, and already showing signs of the extraordinary bond that connected them all. Aelira held the child in her arms, tears streaming while Caelreth stood beside them, watching, protecting, loving. The valley, the hidden sanctuary, seemed to breathe with them, the magic of centuries flowing through every leaf and stone. This was not just the birth of a child, but the beginning of a new era, a bridge between human and vampire, mortal and immortal, darkness and light. Aelira looked up at Caelreth, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. "We did it," she whispered. Caelreth's crimson eyes softened, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "Yes," he said. "We have begun something that no force in the world can undo, and we will protect it, no matter the cost." The wind carried the scent of the forest, the city far below unaware of the change that had come. Aelira, Caelreth, and the child were bound together by blood, by love, and by destiny. The world had been tested, and they had endured. And as the sun rose, painting the valley in shades of gold and crimson, Aelira whispered softly to the child,
You are...
"You are safe. You are love." Caelreth's hand covered hers, resting over the child, and together they faced the future, unbroken, unafraid, and united. The alpha vampire had returned. The woman he loved had survived, and their child would carry the promise of a new world, one forged in shadow, tempered by love, and unshakable in its strength.